Hey everybody, welcome to my garden. Today I'm going to be planting up some perennials that we talked about a couple videos ago, and then I also wanted to give you some updates on other projects I'm working on. So this week in the Pacific Northwest, it's been raining off and on a lot, so I've been darting out to do some projects here and there. But I do get asked from time to time, what should I be working on this time of the year in the season? And depending on where you live in the country, you might just be starting your spring cleanup, you might be in the throes of your spring cleanup, or if you're in some of those warmer zones, 9 and above, you're probably on your way to full bloom of perennials and putting in all of your annuals. Here in the Vancouver, Washington area, we are zone 8B, and it has been a particularly warm and pretty dry spring. So we've gotten a lot done. And then also with the fact that we're all home all the time, we're getting even more done. So I am quite a bit ahead of the game of where I would normally be this time of year. But things that I'm working on, my vegetable starts, I am starting to harden off my tomatoes, my eggplant, my peppers. And by hardening off, I mean I'm taking the seedlings in their trays or those that I've transplanted. I've transplanted most of those to 4-inch pots or larger, and I'm bringing them outside during the day if it's sunny, just for a couple hours to give them that exposure to the outdoors, some great wind, and then I'm taking them back in. I probably won't plant those in my vegetable garden until probably a couple weeks from now when it gets to more consistently in the 50s at night. For my cooler weather crops, I have put those in my vegetable garden, and I did work on that this week. So I put in things like my peas, my broccoli, my spinach, cabbage. I have strawberries that are going. All of my herbs have been planted up so far, and they're all just taking off just wonderfully. I started a couple types of peas from starts, and then I also just did a direct sow of some peas into the vegetable garden, and I can show you that in a little bit later. The other things that I'm working on are just general cleanup. You can see behind me, my maple trees have given me the gift of all of their droppings all over my garden. So I am just letting that happen and giving it some time. We have been putting down some mulch into these areas just to try and keep the moisture going into some new plants. But once the trees stop giving us their lovely gifts, we'll get all that cleaned up as well. The other thing I'm doing is I'm still planting perennials, and that is what we'll do today. But first, I want to actually, let's walk around the shade garden and I'll show you some of what's going on. All right, so I'm back here in the shade garden, and like I told you, there's a lot of confetti. The maple trees had a party, let's say, but let's look past that, and then you can see the growth that's happening in this bed. Now, this comes to you courtesy of a lot of slug bait. The number of hostas in this garden is just outstanding, and for the most part, done a pretty good job. I have a couple holes here and there. I do walk the garden every morning just to try and see where I'm missing some pieces. This hosta needs to be cleaned up on the top, but the new growth below it has been spared from the slugs and the snails. I do want to show you my favorite hosta that's happening right now, and I'm just going to step back here. This is the Gentle Giant, and this is the hosta that I planted up last year. This hosta will get about, I want to say 5 feet tall and about 8 to 10 feet wide at maturity. It'll take a few years for it to get there, but this year it should put on some significant growth. So just this growth, this was the last hosta I've had to sprout up, and it's already just massive. So we'll keep an eye on this, and I'll give you guys an update. Behind here, I planted up some Solomon seal. I will be putting in some sweet woodruff in this area too, just to give some more ground cover so I don't have to deal with weeds. I do have those in the garage I need to bring out to get planted. But other than that, just kind of waiting for this area to fill in with this hosta, and then just some ground cover and ferns around it. So heading over here, just kind of keep taking you around. The Annabelle hydrangea hedges are starting to come up slowly but surely, and they're doing great. Coming through here, and then backing up a little bit more, I wanted to touch on the climbing hydrangea. This has put on so much growth just in, I want to say, the last week and a half, and it's actually climbing up a lattice. I've had this in a pot climbing up a stake that was only about 3 feet tall, and it did great, but it needed something bigger. So it's now in the ground and it's climbing up. One thing about climbing hydrangeas is that they don't put on full bloom until they've reached the top of their climb. So if you have one in your yard and it's just not blooming, it's not blooming, make sure you give it something to climb and let it climb. It takes some patience, and then you'll start getting some blooms. I do have one starting to come out here, which is great. And I need to secure this trellis a little bit more. This is a tough plant. So I just think that's awesome. It's underplanted, but they actually got bigger than I thought by a columbine. So I have some gorgeous columbine that is growing right in front of it. And look at these leaves. If you can see those, how cool are those leaves? I was a little worried about this spot because columbine usually need a little bit more sun than this gets, but when the maple trees are not fully leafed out, this spot actually gets a little bit more sun than usual. So that's pretty darn cool. Ignore the background here. It's a work in progress, but we have been putting in some benches. So I'll talk about that a little bit later once that whole spot gets worked out. And then just watching this area grow. We have hostas and lungwort and heuchera and brunnera, all at a nice new fern, all working in harmony, and then another Solomon seal. So that's the update on the shade garden. Let's go get to planting on the perennials. So today I'm finally going to be planting up this border that was newly created by removing quite a bit of sod earlier this spring. And the plants that I'm going to be using are this pink perfusion salvia from Proven Winners. We talked about it a couple of videos ago. And I have spent quite a bit of time over the last week and a half staring at the placement of these plants. I don't know if you guys do this, but I have to look at where the plants are going to go from almost every single angle. Up the hill, down the hill, different sides of the garden, from our windows in our house, down, and think about it and overthink about it. So today we are here. I am going to be placing these in the ground and we'll get going. All right, there you have it. So we planted up these 6 pink perfusion salvias today, and I think it looks amazing, and it will be an excellent border plant on this new border that I've made with removing the sod and pushing out my garden beds. A couple things that I did that I didn't talk about before were, one, after I planted, I came back through and I tamped down each plant with my foot. I did it lightly. I'm not putting a lot of pressure, but that's really just to make sure that you get out all of those air pockets within the new planting, within that hole, and to make sure that it has the best success rate with the root production. I did that a little bit with my hands as I was going through and planting, but it's just a habit I've gotten into, just to come back through, push in with my foot a little bit, and just to double check. The second thing that I did is I pulled in the drip line. I have in this area, you can see behind me, it's all quite exposed, 1/2-inch pipe that has 1 gallon per hour emitters every 12 inches. Now you can get this more commonly with those emitters every 18 inches. In this section, because it's so heavily planted, I do every 12 inches, which is my preference. And these plants are really heat tolerant, drought tolerant. So I really think that they're only going to need that gallon per hour, because when I run this for about 10 minutes, doing the math, that's 1/6 of a gallon per hour. Ryan can check me later on the math, but I'm pretty sure that's right. And that should be enough. They also get sprinkler water coming out to the lawn. I will watch them as the summer goes on, and if I find that they need a little bit more water, I'll pop in a couple emitters. No big deal. The last thing I did is I brought in a little bit of mulch. Clearly this whole section needs to be mulched this spring, but I wanted just to get this section done so you guys can see what the final product will look like. And mulch does a few things for you. It holds in the moisture and it covers those unsightly drip lines, and then it just looks nice overall, which I think is a nice fresh finish to a brand new planted bed. Finally, I want to give a shout out to this red leaf maple, because it's so beautiful and it's just filling in so nicely. I have had this in about a 12-inch, maybe it was a 14-inch pot for a couple of years, and it finally got put into the ground late last year, and it is so happy. I am so excited to see what this is going to do. So thanks for working with me today, and we'll see you next time. Bye. If you like what you see here today, be sure to click the like and subscribe button, and if you want to be notified of new episodes, click the bell.